Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today is episode 61, and we're going to be talking about illness and immunity. So it is right around January of 2026, and so this is a really timely issue that we would like to discuss because chances are you're probably starting to run across people that are getting sick. We've gotten through the holidays now, so you brought everybody together and exchanged all kinds of germs, and so now stuff is probably starting to set in. Also, if you're a New Year's resolution kind of person and now you've kind of gone back into the gym, if that's one of your resolutions, now you're exposed to all those germs that come with it because people are nasty by nature and they don't wipe the stuff down.
And they go to the gym sick,
Yes, and because they have to keep their New Year's resolution, and so they go in sick, spread all kinds of stuff. And so now is about the time between mid to late January, early February, where you start to see the accumulation of illness and sickness. So we thought that we would bring this episode to you to talk about maybe things that you can do to boost your immunity, and also how to make that decision on whether you need to adjust your training plan because of sickness. What are some of our rules and things that we tell our athletes on whether you should continue to go ahead and train? Do we need to make an adjustment and so forth? So that's what today's episode is all about. So let's get into a little bit of housekeeping before we start really digging into this. So if you're enjoying the content that we're coming out with in the podcast, please consider leaving a review and a comment on wherever it is that you consume your podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts. Those reviews and comments greatly help us. We felt strongly from day one to not monetize the podcast. So we don't have sponsors. We don't have ads. We don't have any stuff like that. We want to come to you unfiltered and uninhibited by anybody else. So leaving these comments and reviews boosts the exposure of the podcast, and that makes people find us easier. And so please consider doing that if you are enjoying the content. Plus, it gives us a little bit of feedback on what you're thinking and what you're getting from the podcast. We also have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. It's a private group on Facebook. We're starting to build out this community a little bit more. We're pushing out some additional content to this group only, where we don't include stuff that's on like the podcast page. We are starting to roll out some stuff into this group. It allows people to connect from the podcast, allows you to have direct connections to us as well, because we will be able to get to the point where once we've built it out, to do Q&A sessions, get some topics and ideas directly from you guys. And that would allow us to come up with content that is more directly tied to your journey and help you along on your path. So please consider going out and joining that group. All you have to do is just answer one simple question, and we'll let you right on in. We are also active coaches and so what we would like to do is, well, I'll just come around. If you're interested in coaching and you want to turn over the reins for somebody else to do your plan, or you just need help and you feel overwhelmed by all the information that's out there, we hope that you would consider coming to us. If you're interested in connecting with Katie, you can go to fuel2run.com. If you're interested in connecting with me, Coach Justin, you can go to Tabula Rasa Racing. We have tons of content on our own respective websites, so you can see all of our coaching philosophy, blogs, and other episodes, video content that's out there. So feel free to check us out. Reach out if you have any questions or would like some guidance. We are actively taking on athletes onto our rosters, and so we would love to connect with you. I believe that's all of the housekeeping. So, Katie, how have you been feeling now that it's kind of in January, and how are you faring? Because you have
Yeah.
you have a younger child, so they're exposed to they're just like little petri dishes that just go out and they accumulate all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff and bring it right into the home. So,
Yeah.
how have you been feeling?
I mean, I think that's part of it is I was a little bit selfish with this topic. And obviously, it's a timely topic for a lot of people, but I did get sick. So my son Theo got sick right before Christmas with what I assume was the flu. We didn't test, but it was a lot of like the fever, chills, fatigue, and then it kind of developed into a cough. So I think that's probably what it was. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going to get it. I made it kind of through Christmas, and then I started feeling not so good, just really off. Like, for me, it was frustrating because I didn't have the full on, this is also kind of interesting because it typically when I have like the full on flu where I have like a fever and chills and I'm like in bed, like there's not any training happening. Like I just obviously, like I think most people have been there, like you just know intuitively, like it's probably not a good idea to get out and try to do your run. You're just not even able to barely get out of bed, right? Or you're coughing or whatever. So it wasn't that bad. So it was kind of an interesting situation where I'm like, I feel like I'm getting sick. I don't feel very good. And then kind of around
Mm,
New Year's, I felt better for like a day and I was able to kind of go and do some exercise. And then it kind of came back with a vengeance with the cough. The cough started and then I was like coughing all night a few nights. And so, and then I still today, like I'm still feel like I'm finally kind of recovering, but I'll wake up with a cough and kind of a runny nose sort of situation. So it's still almost like lingering 3 weeks later. So it's just been interesting because it's like, how do you run, through like what should the protocol be for some situations like that where you're kind of sick, but you're not really sick, and so that's something we're going to talk about today. But that's just like so that's me. I'm finally feeling better, but I'm bracing for, there's still a long kind of cold and flu season ahead of us. And so I know it's probably not the last time I'm going to get sick. I hope I don't, but there's like also norovirus and which is like my worst fear. I'm like, I'd rather have a cold than have some sort of
yeah,
GI issue. But yeah, so this is just something, I thought was timely because I'm sure other people are in a similar situation. And I also think about my race, my marathon last December in 2024, where not this last December, but December before, where I did run a marathon when I was probably still not recovered or still kind of dealing with something. So, talking even about what to do if you have a race, which is kind of the worst case
right.
scenario probably, but what's a protocol there and should you race or no not race and what would you kind of consider? So, I thought that would be a good topic and then we can kind of talk at the end. We'll see how long it takes, but we'll talk a little bit about prevention and immunity and kind of what we can do to sort of prevent getting sick or help our immune system out a little bit too. So I think this will be kind of a fun, interesting topic. Hopefully people will enjoy it. Other than that, I mean, I've been hyper focusing on some things I was telling Justin about. I think I mentioned this in my deep dive. When I was talking about dietitians and sports dietitians and what a CSSD is, a sports certified specialist in sports dietetics. And so I've been working to get that certification back and I just submitted my hours and then I have to wait and it's a $350 test. It's not a cheapo test. It's like a
Yeah,
expensive thing. And so I have to wait to see if they approve it and it's for me not super easy because I own a private practice. So I'm worried that they won't approve it and I spent a lot of time trying to gather all my hours together and get that situated. So I've done that, and then I also was, like, really worried about grandma's marathon and figuring out where I was gonna stay there because I kinda dropped the ball and procrastinated and didn't do that really early, like, figuring out lodging, so I got that figured out pretty much, so I feel a lot better. I'm just kinda now waiting for that test to see if
yeah.
I could take the test, and it would be really great if I could have that CSSD certification again because 'cause I've had it before and then kinda dropped it 'cause I had my son, and now I really want it again, so hopefully, and then I gotta work maybe with Justin on the strength and conditioning one,
Nah,
so
I know.
This
I
is the
still,
year of the certifications for me,
I know.
maybe.
I still haven't pulled that trigger. I have been so consumed. I've been wrapped up in doing all kinds of stuff this week with more like content creation and things like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
And
Well,
so
it will
it's
be a
like
while before I'm
everything
ready.
is kind of like been put onto the side
This
burner
might be like a
as
summer thing for me, that CSCS, so that's a different, it's a certified strength and conditioning coach
right.
certification, so it's a different one, but that might not happen for me until after my marathon anyway, so you know, if you wanted to do it along with me, study partners or something, you'll have to, that's probably my timeline anyways, because
Uh,
once I get through the CSSC and then I'll have diving into my marathon stuff, it'll be pretty hectic for a while, plus I'm gonna be doing content for that, so
this is a big year for us. I like
I
both of
think it
us,
is.
just like as a team, and then are like individually. I'm not like a content creator kind of person, so this is something that's been way outside of my wheelhouse. Something
Yeah.
that I'm learning how to do, and I'm becoming really, really good at Chat GPT to try and help me like figure out like how to go about doing this. But my background isn't in like physiology or anything like that. So it's like this is as an adult, it's almost kind of like adult learning, where you've got
Mm,
like these programs that are designed to help, adults, get college degrees and things like that. And, it's a very different teaching model, for adult
right.
education. And I mean, I have 2 college degrees, but not anything associated with physiology or the human body. It was all in economics. So it's like
Oh,
this is
fun.
really, really kind of like outside
Outside of
of
your,
yeah. So
yeah.
I'm really kind of insecure. It's like so I need a study partner that has
Yeah, because
some
'cause I'm like,
kind
that's
of
a lot. That's
background in like
my whole background
the
is, like,
body or whatever,
kinesiology
just
and
to try and help me through this because yeah,
anatomy,
this
yeah, all those things. But it is a review, like, a lot of it to me, because it's hard. I mean, I remember those days in anatomy, memorizing all the different muscles and bones and things like that, but that's been years, so
that's what I'm
but
scared of the
honestly, a lot of
most.
those concepts are still, on my forefront of my mind. A lot of just the training concepts and, like, some of the general physiology and stuff, but yeah, that's the sort of stuff of, like, muscles and tendons and bones, that's gonna be a review, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see. It'll be fun because I think it's really good to, I think we grow when we challenge ourselves a little bit
Yeah.
to do stuff that is uncomfortable, or just learning or even relearning concepts. As an adult, especially, like, I think a lot of people just kind of like they do their job and they don't always challenge themselves to be out of their comfort zone and learn. And I think we grow. And I don't know, probably prevents like Alzheimer's when we're constantly
Yeah.
having to challenge our brain, right? So it's preventing dementia, maybe. I don't know. That's a side, maybe a side benefit of it.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's, I think. And then when you do master something, like that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I was talking with the drone. We got these drones. I have a drone that's supposed to follow me running. I was gonna and that's out of my comfort zone for sure. I have no comfort in this, and I've been trying to watch videos on it and stuff like this. And I'm like, when I master that skill and I can get that thing to like fly and take videos, I'm gonna
Yep.
feel so good about it. So
My drone is still sitting in the box. I took it out of the box to charge the battery and just to make sure it came with all the right pieces, but
right.
I haven't had a chance to do anything with it.
I know.
And I'm
So
so excited for it
uh,
because I think that was one of the things that, I really wanted to do is like provide some like really kind of like
right,
action content,
action.
for us going out there. And so
That's what I was thinking.
eventually it will get out there. I had the plans to like take it with me today because we're recording pretty early in the morning and I'm waiting for the temperature to rise, but I have like a 2.5 hour gravel bike workout to do. So I was
Oh,
like, well, I'll just take the drone out and have it, record like different segments of the ride just so I can get used to it. But I haven't read the manual. I haven't opened up the
yeah.
app. I haven't done
I
anything
would
to try and
I
figure
would
this out. So I was like,
take your
let's
time
not
to
push
do
that
that
envelope
first,
yet.
because
So
I kind of felt the same way, and I took it out, and my husband was lovely enough to put the thing together for me, so it was all ready, but it was like I took it out and you had to like, calibrate it, and it was always like turning it in weird directions, and that took me way too long to figure out. I
yeah,
think that should have been a lot easier. And then it was like I got it out and I was like trying to get it to fly, and then I freaked out because I was like, I don't actually know how to fly this thing. And I grabbed it. I shouldn't have done that, and it like got my finger, and that hurt. And I still have a little mark, like a little one of those blood blisters where that happened like 2 weeks ago. So I'm like, okay, let me let me put it away for now. I got this far. And then I've been waiting for like a day when I have some time and it's not windy. And it's been really windy here, so I really haven't had that opportunity
Yeah.
yet. But I'll get it out. And once I figure it out and I get it flying and, I think there's other things along with it that I didn't realize too once I started researching about like the FAA and you can't fly it. But I'm like, I'm never going to fly it super high. It's just going to be following me running and it might go a little bit above me, but I'm never going to fly this thing into the airspace where there's airplanes.
Right.
So I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be a problem, but I'm like, I also don't want to get in trouble. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's more to this than so we'll keep you posted. I'll keep you
Yeah,
posted too.
we'll keep everybody posted. So if you see content coming out from us where it shows us like doing stuff, out there running or riding or whatever, then
No, we don't have airplanes
maybe
following.
we figured it out and we're able to, capitalize on this. But yeah, so
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It'll be great. I'm like, it'll be fun when I figure it out, and hopefully I don't ruin my drone. So yeah, so let's get started on our topic.
yeah, let's get rolling on this. So well, Katie, I'm gonna like turn the reins of the conversation over to you. This was kind of like this was your idea to kind of bring this topic in. I think it was incredibly timely, and I think it's awesome. But I want you to kind of like drive the conversation, and I'll just kind of
Sure.
step in with questions that
Or
I've
stuff
got.
like that.
So
Yeah. And I
let's
mean, your
roll.
thoughts too. I do want, like, if you have some thoughts about athletes you work with or yourself and how
Mhm.
you manage it is helpful too. Cause it's just, I think once we kind of get to the recommendations piece, it's a little bit harder to sometimes know what to recommend or there are some checklists and things you can look up or, I try to catch up on some blogs. Eventually I'll probably put something out that includes like a checklist that you can use. But yeah, let's get started. So I think the best thing to kind of get started with here would be like I think I made some notes and the first thing I sort of put in here, and this is maybe where we actually could start, is just there's the International Olympic Committee. They have a consensus statement on acute respiratory illness in athletes. So this is just specifically on the acute respiratory infection. So I think this would include like the flu, COVID, colds, things like that into that. And those are like the major ones that people tend to get. I think like RSV sometimes might be included in there for children. So, but those are like those types of illnesses that really impact our respiratory, the ability to
Okay.
breathe, like that kind of. And then we can maybe talk a little bit about, there wasn't like one specifically for GI related illnesses, but we'll talk a little bit about that too, maybe what we might recommend there. But the IOC, and I think they have a lot of like consensus statements. So if you're ever curious about various, I mean, obviously it's just for things that might relate to like athletes and maybe elite athletes. But if you're ever curious about, oh, what about like injuries, and they have like some consensus statements on like athletes and injuries, I believe, and they have some other consensus statements on like eating, under eating, or red S, like relative energy deficiency in sport. And there's like a lot of things they kind of put out there
Mhm.
that might be helpful. So I thought that for this topic, they have some good research behind it too. But for anyone sick, like their general guidelines emphasize, so the neck rule. So
Yep.
if it's like above the neck, so you're stuffy, you have a cold essentially, where it's just like you're blowing your nose, but you're not like coughing. It's not coming from the lungs. It might be okay to continue training. We'll talk about like the checklist that you can use. But for anything below the neck, so like especially something like fevers, but like hacking, coughing, chest congestion, like any sort of body aches or fatigue or stomach flu stuff, like we would want to use caution when we're trying to exercise in those situations. And I think too, it's kind of hard because I think even when I've had colds in the past, like I think back to last year or maybe the year before, where it may have been last year when I was starting to ramp up training a little bit for the Vermont City Marathon, and I had like a upper respiratory infection that was mostly just like a cold. And, I kept running through it, even when I didn't
Mhm.
feel that
Yeah.
great. I was like, well, I don't feel terrible, but I don't have any other symptoms. And sometimes it's hard to know, like, is that making it last longer? Like if I had just taken
Yeah.
several days off to let it get better, would it have gotten better or would it not? Because I've done that before where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just actually try to nip this in the bud. I'm
Yeah.
gonna try to
Yeah.
get this done, get this over, and just like let myself rest and recover. And I'll take like 2 or 3 days off, and it's not really getting better, and I'm like, "Okay, well, I don't know, like, I'm trying to rest, I'm trying to let my body heal, but this isn't getting better, and I don't know how many more days I can take off from running." So you sometimes have to make those decisions, and it probably depends a bit on where you are in your training cycle and things like that, but I think the other thing you wanna keep
Yeah.
in mind is just, like, is your continuing to train gonna prolong the illness even more? And then you have compromised training for 3 weeks versus maybe taking several days off and then being able to kinda jump back into it sooner. And those are just hard things to know, I think, a lot of times because we just don't know what our body is doing. We can't, like, tap into our immune system and say like, "Hey, how are things going? Are you guys fighting this
Yeah.
off? Are you gonna you know what I mean? Like your little, immune cells aren't really gonna be able to be telling you how their battle with the illness is going, right? So, we kind of have to use our subjective of how we're feeling and listening to our body, and I think that's sometimes challenging because I think as humans, we can sort of tell ourselves we feel better than we do, maybe?
Yeah.
If you're kinda looking for, like, some sort of, like, symptom tracking thing, there's a nice little checklist too that this IOC has put out that kinda talks about when you should or should not, and it's like yes and no questions. So the first question's like, "Does the athlete have any of the following symptoms?" And it's like chest pain, discomfort or pressure, excessive shortness of breath, palpitations or, like, racing heart, dizziness, excessive fatigue, feeling higher level of effort, with the exercise, any joint pain or muscle pain, and just not feeling generally well. If you answer yes to any of those, it's probably, in their opinion, a bad idea to go out and exercise, right? So that's kind of what
Yeah.
those are the questions, right? So any of those answering yes to, and I think most of us would agree. I remember last year after that race, I can talk a little bit about my race or not this last year, but in 2024 with my race in Tucson and running through probably what a GI bug that I had, and it took me so long to recover, and then I think I got something else after that because my immune system was so beat up, and I remember going out for a run, like, I was just a little bit tired, but not excessively tired, and just going out in my body, like, trying to run, and it was just like, "This sucks." Like, my body was just so fatigued, and this was,
Mhm.
like, maybe over a week after the marathon, so it wasn't like I was going out right away anyway, and I just was gonna go do a jog. I remember making it maybe a mile and then stopping and walking and, like, literally walking home. So it was kind of that fatigue situation, but I think also, sometimes you just have to if you go out and you don't feel good, like, you just have to kinda see, like, sometimes test the waters a little bit, but,
Yeah, I agree
you
with
know
that.
'cause I was feeling fatigued, but I didn't have any of the other symptoms there, but it was just like I went out and I was like, "This is not happy for me," like and I went home and, like, lied down in my bed and was like, "Okay, I'm gonna just rest a few more days." The other question here is about, a little bit about cardiovascular responses, like heart rate too, so there's some questions here, and some of this you probably aren't going to be able to know the answer to because some of these are related to a lot of times our Olympic athletes have a lot more resources, like, they might have somebody that can, like, measure an EKG or something like that.
Right.
But, so any of the following, clinical signs, so if you have, like, like, this one's easy, if you go out and you have, like, a really like, shortness of breath, like, you feel like you're like,
Mhm.
really, like, this easy pace and you're, like, gasping for air, that's probably a red flag. I would stop at that point because that's probably a sign something, is going on in your lungs. If you do have an electrocardiogram situation but another one you could look at would probably be HRV. Like, this is something that we
Okay.
measure, so if you're measuring, like, to the last few days for me, like, my HRV is I don't know, I don't wanna talk about what my HRV is exactly because I don't want people to compare theirs to mine because everyone's a little
Right.
different. It was, I would say, like, maybe, like, 15 to 20 points lower
Okay.
yesterday than
Yeah.
it was the days prior, and then this morning, it was still pretty low. Like, it's not good, and I've had some sleep issues, the wind has been keeping me up, but I don't know, I've also had the stress of, like, trying to get these things done and, I felt a little better, so my training went up a little, so there's probably a lot of things, but also sometimes if it's happening, like, if I wake up tomorrow and I still feel like even after trying to rest a little bit and maybe sleep better and it's still low, like, I don't usually take 1 or 2 days of HRV readings too seriously,
No.
but my heart rate was up today too, so there's a couple little signs there that I'm like, "Ooh, this is a little bit of a red flag," like, my resting heart rate was, maybe 5 points higher than it usually is, 4 or 5 points higher, and then my HRV the past 2 days has been lower than what it usually is. So we're just comparing it to what our usual baseline is. And then, so tomorrow, if it's low, I might kind of be like, ooh, like maybe I should take it really easy on my long run, or kind of just like maybe figure something else out and postpone it, the long run, So it's sometimes you can use those types of things because none of us probably have an electrocardiogram to use on
No.
ourselves, or it can have but the HRV could be one, but you do have I think the way you use that is it's not like one day where it's low is "Oh, no, I'm getting sick." It's like you measure that every day, and then you're kind of watching it, and if it's low for several days in a row, it's probably a sign that you're overly stressed or something's happening in your body, and that could be something to use. And heart rate too is your heart rate starting to go up. Some people use respiratory rate, which you can Garmin's will sometimes measure
Mhm.
that. But respiratory rate starts to go up, like you're breathing a little bit more than usual. Sometimes people will use body temperature. So there's lots of like different clinical ways. I mean, at home, you could sort of measure, is your body temperature rising a little bit or something like that. Like, because sometimes we will see a rise in body temperature before we feel like we have like a fever, maybe, that could be a possibility too. So just like those are things you could maybe use on a day-to-day basis just to test, because then you would know maybe even before you get sick. And we'll talk about some nutrition strategies, but I think then you would kind of know, hey, before you
Mhm.
would even start to feel symptoms, and or you would know, okay, my HRV and my resting heart rate are up 3 days in a row now. Something's up. I need to maybe rest a little bit more, and you might be able to get those signs before you even start to get sick to start backing off a little bit and resting a little bit more. So I do think those things can be helpful too when you're thinking about illness. And then there's some other like, there's a third question here. Does the athlete have any of the following symptoms 24 hours after exercise? So, like, after you're done with your exercise, did you start to get some chest pain? Do you have shortness of breath? Is your heart racing or irregular heartbeat? Dizziness? So, there's questions like after the exercise, muscle joint pain, not feeling well. I mean, this has happened to me before where I've been maybe on the verge of getting sick, but I'm not sick. And then I go out and do like a hard training session and I just feel bad after the
Yeah.
session. You know what I mean? And I'm like, ooh, like just achy joints, tired, fatigued. Like you
Mhm.
can kind of feel like something's coming on. I feel like this is kind of for that particular
Yeah.
question is kind of for that such scenario. So that it is kind of nice to have some, so like I said, I'm going to try to kind of put that into a nice little yes or no like table that people can use to maybe analyze that and think, okay, and then I might have to put in a little bit more information if I put the HRV thing in there. I might have to kind of put more in there because that's a tricky one
Yeah.
because HRV can be impacted by so many things, not just illness, but stress and things like that. So sometimes it's hard to
Mhm.
know. But arguably, if you're so stressed out for 3 days in a row that your HRV is so much lower, maybe you don't need to be stressing your body more by doing a hard workout anyway. So that will be something I will include. That's, I think, helpful to kind of think about, like when you're deciding whether or not you're going to exercise. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you have any? I don't know. Do you have anything like with
I
that,
I
like
got
that
I
you
got a
want to
lot of
add? Or
thoughts.
okay. I just like we
I
pause there and maybe we can like
Yeah.
chat a little bit about what
So
our thoughts are.
I'll chime in with the HRV thing right off the bat. So
Mhm,
what I typically will do when using HRV is I'll take whatever today's reading is and compare it to whatever the trend over the past 5 to 7 days.
mhm.
So if I say, if my HRV today is lower than the average that it's been over the 5 to 7 days, then I start to pay attention.
Right.
But anything less than that 5 to 7 day window, there's so much volatility in it that and there's, like you said, there's so many things that can impact its the reliability of its calculation. Also, if you're used, it also depends on how you're measuring HRV as well. What
Yeah, because you
we
have to be consistent with
You have to
measuring
be
it.
really
Yeah.
consistent, and the whatever device that you're using to measure it and produce the calculation matters. So
Mhm.
you have to consistently use that device. You can't like switch things up and let's say that you've been measuring your HRV through your Garmin, and then all of a sudden you get a system that's like Morpheus
Morpheus,
system.
yeah.
Those two are not going to be comparable. So you have to take the Garmin series and throw it out the window, and then rely on Morpheus,
Yeah,
or
and you have to
use
get enough
Morpheus and
data in
ignore
there.
Garmin. And you have to
Yeah,
accumulate the data. So
data, yeah.
that's how I
It's just
typically will use
and, like, one day of
HRVs.
low HRV, like yesterday, I wasn't that worried
No.
because I was like, "Oh, I just kind of had some stress," and I still felt pretty good, like, not great, but I still did some run when I finally got power. I did a run and it was okay. But then today, it's kinda got me I'm like, "Okay, this is, like, the 2nd day," so it's got me a little bit paying attention, and then by tomorrow, if it's still low, I might be like then I might take action, so I don't usually take
Yeah.
action on it 'cause it 'cause it happens. We have days that we don't recover that well, and doesn't always mean we're not gonna perform well, but it might carry over, so if you don't rest eventually, yeah, eventually it could have its impact.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just think yeah, I agree.
The
Consistency
next
with
piece
it
to it
and
is,
more than
yeah,
one day. Yeah.
I think the next piece is like with the checklist. Some of these symptoms, if you're talking about excessive fatigue or tiredness, muscle and joint pain, not quote unquote not feeling well during exercise, that could just be sheerly driven by training volume. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do
Yeah,
with whether you're sick
true.
or not. So sometimes
That's true.
the art, I'd say it's more of an art of knowing your body rather than the
Right.
science of knowing it, is trying to differentiate those signals that your body is sending you. Is this illness driven or is this training volume driven?
Mhm.
Those two will interact together, but it's not necessarily the cause of it. So you may not be getting sick. You may just have a series of 3 days where you may have stacked on some significant training volume and your body's just responding
Mhm.
like it does. It doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, I'm coming down with the cold or with the flu or whatever.
That's true,
So
yeah, 'cause
on
you're
cases like that, I typically won't make an adjustment to the training plan.
yeah.
And what I will do is I'll give myself a little bit more of a warm up.
Mm.
So, if I start to feel like really sore and my legs just feel heavy, rather than using my typical, like, let's say a 10-minute warm up that I would have in a workout, I may let that increase to like 15 to 20 minutes of warm up and see how the body is responding after that. After the 20 minutes, or like 15 to 20 minutes, if my body is still struggling, then I say, okay, well, maybe there's something to this, and it's
Mhm.
not necessarily training driven or fatigue driven. Then I need to start paying attention. But
Yeah.
when you start doing stuff like, training for marathons and full Ironman, it can take a long time for the body to kind of like get on the same page as
Right,
the
yeah,
plan.
that's true.
So
Yeah, it's true.
when I give an athlete, let's say if we're training for a half Ironman or a full Ironman, and I have the athlete doing a 5-hour bike ride, I just almost completely disregard what that athlete did during the first hour of the ride, because to me that's the warm up. When you're starting to stack on that kind of volume, then the body is doing all kinds of stuff that's not going to be a true measure of potential, of
Mhm.
performance potential. So I'll say, just ride however your body is feeling for the first hour. And then we start to kind of get into the structure of the workout. So sometimes just being a little bit more patient during the
Mhm.
workout is really all that you need to differentiate the signals that your body is trying to send, whether this is like illness driven or is this fatigue and training volume driven. To me,
Right.
that's the biggest key and the hardest thing to do. And it comes with just experience, honestly. And it almost comes with the willingness to be wrong, because
Mm.
it's kind of like hindsight. That's the only way that you can really
Yeah,
kind of figure things out. It's
right,
as if you push the envelope and then you discover that you push the envelope and you're just like, okay. But
right.
the key, I think that those are important. And I encourage my athletes to be wrong, because that's how we know the next time. So
Mhm.
if we start to push the envelope a little bit and you're just like, and now they get sick, now we know it's like, okay, let's write this scenario down. Let's document it so that when it comes back again, we'll be more informed and can make better decisions.
Right.
And I can tell you a little bit about kind of like what I've been going through is every year, this time of year. So let's say like anytime between late December to late February, my joints hurt incredibly bad. It's
Mhm.
like my hands, my knees, my shoulders, elbows. It's like almost every single joint in my body is pissed off for like 3 months. And so I started thinking about it. So this year I said, well, what can I do to maybe alleviate some of this? So I started to bring in the infrared sauna and the contrast therapy and stuff like this to see if it helps. And, I was talking with my PT and my chiropractor, and so I was kicking around the ideas because I was starting to notice this joint pain, and I had brought in the infrared sauna into the therapy. So I said, well, could the infrared sauna be causing my joint pain? Because it's counterintuitive because of the additional blood flow. You would think it's supposed to alleviate things, but it's like starting to run after you haven't ran in months and months and months. Is it just something that your body is reacting to, and it gets better as it starts to accumulate the effects? So is this going to get better? So one of the things that I discovered is the barometric pressure during the winter months is higher. That barometric pressure alone can cause stiffness in joints, and it can thicken the fluid and the viscosity of the fluid that are in the joints. And so you have decreased mobility, increased joint pain, especially during the winter months. And then once the weather starts to warm up and the barometric pressure adjusts, the joint pain goes away, which is what I saw last year and I'm starting to see this year. So I'm trying to put these pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so now I'm like, okay, well, it's not my training that's wrong, and I'm not quote unquote sick. This is just the environment and the time of year that I'm in, and that if I just stay the course, it'll fix itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so using stuff like muscle and joint pain as an indication that you're getting sick may not be as reliable if you don't understand the nuances of how the body kind of reacts to its environment. So it's just something that's
It's
just
just
an
hard.
experience. It's
hard
so hard,
because
and we've been doing this for a really long time, and it's something that I never knew about until I started to experience it. And unless I kept pretty detailed notes on like my training and things like that, I would never be able to like put these pieces of the puzzle together and make these connections. And so, I think that that's why it's really important to record these experiences that you have. And so if you start to see trends and repetitive occurrences of things, then it's easier to make these associations. And so, I mean, I'll tell you right off the bat, I'm horrible at adjusting my plan for sickness. I'm really bad at it for me. I'm much better at it with my athletes because I tend to be a lot more conservative with them. But for me, I'm really bad at it.
Right.
And I'll own that 100%.
I think I'm not, I don't know. I don't know if I think I'm okay with it because there's several situations where, like, even this last 3 weeks, I haven't been, I mean, the intensity has gone down for the 2 weeks. I still was training, but I just can't intuitively. I mean, just like listening to my body, like I can't do the intensity. Like I just can't. So I just keep running, and I kept going to do like strength training and some CrossFit stuff, but I took the intensity way down. I just didn't push myself, so it's like that, whether that's just because I couldn't or because I just knew it was a bad idea if I did, but I still train, so I don't know. I think there has been examples in the past though where I haven't been very good at it. So maybe now I'm just better at it because of experience. But also with that muscle and joint pain thing, I think that's interesting because you're right. Like there are days, and I think it's just years of training for me too, just knowing because maybe it's colder out. Maybe it's the barometric pressure. Some days when it's colder out, like I'll get knee ache pains, and I'm running and it's like, oh, my knees are, ooh, that's painful. Like just a joint pain that kind of sometimes is like alarming almost, but I know it's just like a joint thing. It's happened before. It happens when it's cold, right? So like, but that's just years of running. Somebody else who doesn't used to that might be like, oh, what is this? Like, so it's hard sometimes to know, even within the athletes I work with who are experiencing things, sometimes it's hard for me to know, is this something related to maybe that, or is it something related to an injury? And so sometimes you have to kind of like ask questions and dig a little deeper, or be like, does it go away when you start to run and you warm up? That's a good question. So let's try to do the warm up. Like you said, let's extend it a little bit. See, like if you're still experiencing a lot of pain, maybe we need to stop. Or if you do that and your fatigue is just like my example of going out to try to run and then a mile in, and I'm like, I knew, like, I just I just feel unwell, like
Yeah.
this is not anything to related to my training because I haven't been training also, but like, and then the joint pain, it's interesting because after my marathon, my Vermont City Marathon last year, I had these really weird symptoms and I didn't have any of the other symptoms. I might have been a little bit tired, but I had this like joint pain that was alarming, very
Yeah.
characteristic of what I normally experience, and I was so worried because 'cause I'm like, I would go out and run and I'm like, I didn't feel good, but I felt, like, okay in my day-to-day life, but then I would go run and it just felt hard, and I was like I had this joint pain that was, like, scary, so I went to the urgent care, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong. They know I mean, it could have been a virus that just manifested that way or something related to, like, my body's reaction to that, but it's just sometimes it's just hard to know. You don't always have the answers of like, what is this? And so for that, I just had to like take it easy and I had to listen to my
Yeah.
body and it was okay timing because I wasn't really in the middle of a training thing, but it's hard sometimes because in that situation it was like, well, I didn't have any of the other symptoms. I didn't have a fever because I would almost say like in this situation, like maybe it's not just one. Yes, like you have to kind of use your discretion, but if you have chest pain or pressure or shortness of breath, I think that's
Yeah.
definitely if you're answering yes to that, I would say maybe take a walk. You know what I mean? Like if you have to do something like something if you can breathe, if you feel up for it, like, maybe do something very, very, like, light and just to maybe get some fresh air, but, if that's happening and you have muscle pain, then yes, absolutely, like, I would not train, but you're right, when you're sort of going through that checklist, there are some there that you're feeling a higher level of effort. Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
A lot of my easy
That's
runs
the
after,
point.
like, my 20-mile long run on marathon training, that next day,
Yeah.
I feel that way. Like, and I'm like, "This is hard," and I'm only I'm running so slow, but I'm like, "This is hard," and I'm just trying to get through it, right? So I'm not getting sick, it's just that my body's had a lot of training, and you have to kind of also take into account what you've done the days before, and,
Hmm.
there's a little bit of nuance here, I think, so but especially if I think you're experiencing maybe a couple of these symptoms, and especially the 3 first things there, or even dizziness during exercise, like, that might be concerning, but any sort of weird heart rate, like, maybe you go out and you're this could be a sign too, like, you go out and you're not really feeling well, but you're looking at your heart rate and you're like, wow, this is really high for what it should be for this pace of it. Something's going on, like, so there's kind of looking at those things. And if it doesn't seem to get better, over the course of your warm up and your heart still seems a little bit higher, your heart rates, it just seems to be racing, or you can actually feel your heart's kind of pounding. That might be a sign because you don't want to be doing anything that's going to hurt your heart. So I think with that checklist, it may be more like, okay, in the context of other things
Yeah.
going on,
Yeah,
generally.
that's the important key. It's like you just
Yeah,
you have to use all of these in context. It's like
yeah,
know what your training volume is, where you are in the plan, what you think that how you should be feeling where you are, and things like the measurement of heart rate. Yeah, it's a valuable tool, and now we basically all of us have access to it if because we're all
mhm,
wearing these wearable devices now that
and they're
track it.
pretty accurate now. The
But
straps
there
and the
are
armbands.
instances where there is significant measurement error. And
Mhm,
I've seen this before where I've looked at my watch and it said, heart rate 160, but the
Oh,
effort
right,
level
yeah,
is like zone 2. I was like, you have to discount the measurement even though your technology is telling you one piece, but you're listening to how your body is feeling.
mhm,
Then you have to say, well, I'm going with how the body is feeling. I'm not going to allow
yeah,
this wearable device to dictate my decision making because it simply could be measurement error. I've done
right,
it to
yeah,
where then I've stopped my watch. I've sat there for like 30 and just paused it for like 30 seconds and then started it back up again. And then the heart rate is right
mhm,
back down to where it should be. And so sometimes these devices, they'll get hung up on stuff and it just gets like caught up in these loops, and
yeah, it's
it's
true.
measurement error, so it's not
Yeah, I wouldn't
consistent with what your body is telling you. And I think that is
it's
so
true.
important, and one thing that many athletes are now lacking is the ability to be in tune with what their body is telling them, because they're so connected to the device that's measuring how they should be feeling, and they're
Mhm,
allowing these devices to overwrite their innate ability to know what the body is telling them. And sometimes it's just lack of experience to not be able to diagnose what the body is saying. So it takes time to gather that experience and know. It's like, okay, well, this is how the effort should feel. Am I breathing hard? Well, there's a difference between breathing hard and not being able to breathe. If you were to stop and stand there and take a deep breath and you feel like there's just something limiting you to get that deep breath in, then yeah, that's the issue that we want to pay attention to.
Right.
Breathing hard or quote unquote shortness of breath is not the same thing as not being able to take in a deep breath.
Deep breath. Yeah.
So, some of these things, and the
Well,
reason that I wanted to bring this up is because I have a feeling we have maybe
I
some
think that's in
new
the
athletes
context
that are
of
out
like
there. So,
you're before you even go out, are you like before you even start your run, if you're experiencing shortness of breath and chest pain before you even start your run,
yeah,
that's probably more the issue. Or when yeah, I think that's kind of where that maybe question's coming from, is like, because obviously if you're running and you're doing an interval session, you're going to be shortness,
yeah,
going to be breathing hard, right? But yeah, I think some of that's just in the context of like before you go out, maybe, but also like I do think like with the heart rate monitors, like if you're just relying on your heart rate monitor on your wrist, yeah, that's not a good. I've had that thing be crazy before. I
yeah,
remember like warming up for like one of those, it was like just a race thing that I was doing. And granted, like, yes, sometimes before like a race, you're a little anxious, so your heart rate might be higher anyways. That's something to keep in mind, is that maybe because of anxiety, you're just having a little bit of elevated heart rate before your race starts or whatever. But it was just really high, like really high. And I'm like warming up in a zone 2. And I'm like, I didn't have my heart rate monitor that I put around my chest. So I'm like, well, the wrist one is like so inaccurate. I'm like, I'm not even
yeah,
going to worry about it. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't feel bad, so you just have to realize that. And even with the chest one, like I've had it be where I'm like looking at it and I'm just running along and all of a sudden it just like spikes up to like 180
yes,
for no
yep,
reason. I think it was because it wasn't like, I wear it like underneath my sports bra. I think maybe something was happening where the sports bra was like, I don't know, I had to stop and, like, readjust it and, like, try to and then it was fine. So, like, you
yeah,
do have to kinda keep that in mind, that there can be the way, something else is impeding it, or the way it's, or maybe there's just, like, a weird glitch, I don't know. So don't yeah, I think you're absolutely right, like, don't take that, like, on its own as the only thing. "Oh, wow, my heart rate's up, but everything else feels good." Like, I feel fine, but because my heart rate on my heart rate monitor is up, I'm not gonna run today. Like, I don't know. I think it's a lot of these are just it's more to use as none of this is like, this is the exact black and white,
hmm
unfortunately. There's no like, "Oh, this is if this is occurring and you answer yes to any of these, like, you shouldn't run, it's or train." It's like, unfortunately, like, maybe there's more to it, like, you just have to really look at a few different aspects of what's going on in context and then make that decision. So,
yeah,
unfortunately, there is no, like, black or white answer to it. But I also think, like, listening to your body is really important, so don't if you go out and you're like, "Okay, kind of I have maybe one of these symptoms, or maybe I'm not feeling well or fatigued or a little bit of whatever, my heart rate's up a little bit, my HRV is not good, I'm gonna run and see how it goes," and you go out and you're like, I do my warm up and I feel bad. I think that's where it's important to try really hard to listen to your body. Like, if it's just, like, everything inside you saying, like, "I don't feel good, this isn't going well," like, it's just like it's just not happening for me today, like, it's just not good, like, maybe try to listen to that, and I think that's where it gets hard, because I think a lot of athletes do have this tendency to wanna push through and be like, "Okay, I'm gonna do the workout anyway because it's what's on my schedule, and I have this race coming up, and I wanna, perform do well in my race, and if I take days off, it's gonna, hinder my
yep,
performance, or I'm not gonna be able to train." And I think that's where people struggle a lot, like, some people don't. I think
me,
that's where I struggle a little bit too, like, it's like but at the same time, I've known the consequences, like, I've suffered the consequences of trying to train through, say, like, a respiratory illness where there was some shortness of breath involved and congestion, like, stuff like that.
yep,
Back when I was training for Boston years ago, I did like, God, I got something nasty, like some sort of illness. I don't know if it was the flu or something, but it lasted for so long. And I think part of it was like I was just so motivated to train, and I'm like, I have a life to do my long run. I just remember suffering through that thing, suffering for like a 12-mile long run or something like that, and it was awful. And then being like coming back and just feeling so much worse, and it like almost took me days to recover from that long run just because I pushed myself through when I probably should have taken the day off. So it can be really hard. But I think of like in that moment, it's like I knew intuitively, like, this isn't a good idea. But then my other side of my brain was like, or my
Yep.
like type A side of like, I've got this race and, coming up in April because it's in April and that's a hard time. I gotta train. I gotta get these long runs in or I'm not gonna do well. And so then it just pushed me to do it even when I wasn't probably like a little achy, maybe a bit of congestion and some shortness of breath that just slowed me down anyway. So it wasn't even a very like it wasn't even a great run. Like it just went out
Yeah.
to do it. And then I suffered. So I think sometimes just listening and being able to be like, okay, I got to stop and I'm going to try to rest. And that's very hard to do for us runners and type A
Yep.
type people. So,
Yeah, for my athletes, when they come to me and they say, hey, I'm not feeling very good or whatever, should we change the plan? My general rule of thumb is, I use the neck rule with my athletes. Is this a head thing or is this a chest thing? If it's a head thing, we're going forward. We'll adjust the intensity accordingly, but let's keep going. If it's a chest thing, let's take the day off and then we'll play the next day by ear.
yeah,
And so it's this communication between me and the athlete that allows me to make the adjustments that are necessary, but I need that quality feedback from them in order to guide appropriately. For me though, it's a different story
right.
completely. I disregard the neck rule completely.
Yeah.
And
Well, I did that one time and it was
yeah.
'cause I already
So for
taken
me,
days off.
I know when my body is done and it's excessive, like exhaustion, not
Mhm.
just excessive tiredness or fatigue, because I'm always tired and fatigued. So that
Right.
does me no good. But I know that there's a whole nother level of fatigue where I start to classify it as exhaustion. Then I know, okay, this is my body telling me.
Right. So when I'm out on a run and I'm like,
Fever.
"Oh, I feel
Yeah.
like I really wanna, like, take a nap."
Yep.
I'm like, "God, I just wanna take a nap."
Yeah. I just disregard that.
But, like,
So
that's a bad sign for me. Like, usually I don't wanna take a nap while I'm on a run, but I've had times where I'm, like, on a run. Well, that happened to me when I had iron deficiency too, so it
yeah.
could be another sign of something else, I suppose, but and when I had mono, which is also a sickness that arguably maybe is a whole other story, but not for today, but, like, that I remember trying to run and I had that and just being like there was, like, a little shady area with some grass and being like, "Oh, I just wanna go take a nap." Like, I just like, if I could just lie down there, I would take a
Yeah.
nap, and I would, like, literally think I would have been able to take a nap. That is a sign something's not quite right. So it's just a whole level of that exhaustion, and you were gonna mention fever, and that's one for sure.
Fever is the other thing. So those are the two things for me is exhaustion and fever. If one or both of those are present, then I know that I'm now pushing the envelope where
Mhm,
it doesn't need to
mhm.
go.
It's go out and
Otherwise,
train.
I'm
Yeah, if
I'm
it's
still
fever,
moving
yeah,
forward. I
right.
will make adjustments to the workouts themselves. So, if I have like a chest cold, I mean, because I'll be honest with you, I trained through COVID. I didn't
Mhm.
really know that I had it, and so I was just like, okay, well, this kind of feels weird, but it kind of feels like a normal sickness. And it wasn't until days later where I noticed, it's like, wait a minute, I can't taste anything, I can't smell anything because I was lighting candles and I couldn't smell anything. I was like, oh, okay, but I had been training the whole time, and so did it make it worse? I don't know. I mean, my philosophy is that sometimes the movement will help exercise the lungs. Whether that's right, I have no idea. Whether there's any science behind it, a doctor could come and tell me, he's like, no,
No.
you're completely wrong. But my philosophy is that, let's say that I have a chest cold and it's a little bit challenging to breathe, but I'm not like shortness of breath where I can't like take in a deep breath. Then I may say, hey, I'm just gonna do something easy, or I won't run, but I'll get on the bike where it's a little bit less demanding. It taxes the aerobic system differently than like a run does for me. Whether that's the same across all athletes, I have no idea. But, if I say I'm feeling a bit of a chest cold, I'm not going to run today, but I'll replace it with, like some zone 2 on the bike or something and kind of test things out.
Right.
Sometimes
like you're just
then,
increasing the intensity, which I think is
yeah. So then I'll say,
good.
well, if it starts to make me cough, then I was like, okay, well, maybe this is my body's way of trying to get the stuff out of my lungs. So I want to cough. I don't want to take cough suppressants, and I don't want to just do nothing because I want to get this stuff out of my lungs. So if I'm coughing, I'm okay with coughing. It depends on like what's coming up,
Right. Yeah. Because there's like a dry cough.
So there's the dry cough. It's like, okay. But if there's like stuff coming up, like green stuff that's coming up, then it's like, okay, now I know kind of like what's going on. But I'll make adjustments to workouts, but I won't like completely like take a rest day unless I've got exhaustion and or fever. Those are the two things that are no go for me.
Something interesting to consider here would be, like you said, like maybe I would suggest if the weather's not terrible, it's not like super, super cold, which sometimes, unfortunately, when sickness is also like when we have cold weather, but to get outside, there is some like, you remember like the Spanish flu and was it the early is it 1800s? Anyway, I don't remember the exact date that was like really bad, but they oftentimes had people like outside, like the people who are sick, they had like these infirmatories. I don't know if I got that word right, but they're outside, like they kept them outside because there's actually something to being in the fresh air. Like, and I don't know what the science is and the mechanism exactly for that. I don't know if it's like the vitamin D that they're getting maybe from the sun, but I do think there's something to being outside. Maybe it's just being in nature and the fresh air coming into the lungs. But I do think there's something to that. I'm not saying that's a cure or whatever, but I know when I had COVID, I tried to go out and walk outside. And I do think that was helpful to get in some fresh air. And I do try to spend some time outside if it's warm out, just hanging out in the sunshine if there's sun. So I think there's something to that. So even if you're not feeling up for like a training, a hard training session, I would argue that'd probably be a bad idea if you're feeling ill to just go out and do some low intensity walking or like a very low intensity run outside, get some fresh air. And I do think that is helpful for the body. So, and there is some like there's a reason I think in certain situations that, people were moved outside, and that's before they even knew what it was, really doing for people to be outside. So something to think about. I think I feel like there's something I read or came across at some point that talked about that. So if I can find that resource, I'll try to include it in the show notes if anyone's like, wow, I really want to see more of the science or the information behind that. Because now I'm curious. I'm like, oh yeah, I forget. That's something to, consider too. So I'll try to see what I can find there and maybe include it in the show notes. I do have some notes here just like to kind of wrap this piece up. Like, so when to definitely rest. I think we've sort of, our consensus is fever and chills. Like if your fever and your chills, like probably the time to rest. Persistent deep cough, especially if it's got the phlegm, the gross green stuff coming out with it. And shortness of breath too, that kind of comes with that. The muscle ache body, like the muscle aches and body pain, I think it's like, this isn't soreness. This is that like full body muscle aches that you tend to get along with sickness. Yeah. So this might be with the other two. And then stomach issues, we haven't really covered too much, but for sure, if you're vomiting and have diarrhea, like just don't rest. You just don't exercise.
It's a no-go.
It's a no-go, right? And then extreme fatigue. So this is like that fatigue I was talking about where you're on a run and you're just like, I just want to take a nap. Like I want to like curl up. I could just take a nap right here. That kind of fatigue that you're just like deep into it, like into the fatigue. And all you want to do is go home and sleep. And it's like everything to get your body out there. That's probably a sign that it's too much fatigue. So that would be the way I would describe it. But would you agree? I think those are like the definitely rest. And then everything else is kind of like, maybe, but if you have any of those symptoms, don't run, don't train. The one thing about the stomach issues, this is also kind of ties in with like the race, should you race? Because I think arguably if you have any of those symptoms, also do not race. Do not race. If you have a race, I'm really sorry that it's just such an unfortunate consequence that you got sick, but your race isn't going to go well. There's a probability you won't finish unless you're okay with just, but arguably if you have a fever, you should not race. So you're just gonna have to cancel it and try again, unfortunately. But my experience with the stomach bug thing was in 2024, I did Tucson and my son got sick like a week before with some stomach issues. And I got like probably that Wednesday or it was the day we were supposed to leave. I started to have some mild stomach issues. So just some upset tummy, like a little bit of this like achiness, muscle achy body pain. I didn't have a fever. I don't think. I don't think I tested, but I didn't feel feverish. I didn't have any deep cough or anything. It wasn't like that. It was like truly like some kind of stomach thing. But I'm like, maybe it's I don't always feel good before my race. Maybe it's just like I ate something funny, so we get to Tucson well, luckily it wasn't, I think it had been vomiting and I wouldn't have done the race because that's a whole sign to me. Like if I'm ever throwing up, that's usually a no-go for sure. But I just was having some stomach issues. And so we get there and I'm still like feeling a little bit off, but I'm like, well, maybe it's just a 24-hour thing. So I'm going to see, we do the day before the race, like I felt okay. So I'm drinking, I'm trying to eat, I'm like able to eat, but my stomach's off. And then I do the race. And even the morning of the race, I was like, my stomach's still a little bit off, but I'm just going to hope it goes okay. So in that situation, that's kind of where it's a little bit of a gray zone because it wasn't a full-on like norovirus, like, it's coming out and it's just the end of the world, you know what I mean? And you're just dying. It was like, my stomach's a little upset, I don't feel quite right. But halfway through that race, it just wasn't gonna be my day, and I had to use the porta potty at almost every aid station beyond mile 16. I think I got to mile 13, had to use the porta potty that made it like 3 more miles, and then the remaining 10 miles, I think every mile or 2, I was at the aid station porta potty. It was not good.
Yeah.
I finished my race, but I was down for the count for so long after that. So it's sometimes it's so hard. Like arguably, maybe I should not have ran that race, or maybe I should have downgraded to the half marathon. I don't know. It's just sometimes hard to know. So,
And you don't know until after the fact. So it's like
yeah,
you can't really be preemptive very
like I
much.
just was like, and I felt okay for the first 13 miles. Like I actually was on pace pretty well until it kind of fell apart. And so it was just really hard to know because I didn't feel awful like in the morning. If I'd been like, oh, I just feel awful and I have, then I would have totally decided maybe I'm not going to finish this or whatever. So it can be hard with racing, but definitely, if you do have any of those issues, especially stomach issues that involve vomiting or very excessive diarrhea and things like that, probably shouldn't race. But that's a hard one too, I think, because we spend so much time training for a race, and then when you get sick before, I just think that's one of the greatest injustices of, but be careful. Like this is where we can go into the next part of our talk would be like the immunity and what to kind of do to keep yourself healthy. And I don't want to get, hopefully won't get too controversial on this, but I do think like for New York City, like I wasn't going to take any chances. I had trained so hard for that race, that marathon. It was my first marathon back in several years. I was spending a lot of money to go. What did I wore that N95 mask the whole time through the airport. And I'm sure people thought I was a weirdo because I'm the only one there in an N95 nonetheless, which is really hard to breathe through, by the way. And it's kind of uncomfortable, but I'm like, I am not getting sick before this dang race. Like, you know what I mean? So sometimes you have to keep yourself healthy. You have to keep yourself, you don't want to get sick right before. So sometimes you have to take drastic measures. And I'm sure people are like thinking, I don't know what they were thinking. I don't care because I'm like, I'm going to run this race. But of course, I run the race and then take the subway.
Yeah.
Like in New York City on our way back to the hotel. And somewhere along the way, on my way home, I was ill, but that didn't matter to me. I was like,
it was after the fact, so it's
I guess
all right.
after the fact, I made it through my race and felt fine. So sometimes there are things you can do to protect yourself.
Yeah.
But not every time. I mean, it's really hard, especially if you have a 6-year-old or kids. Like anyone who has young children will know, like they live with you, they want to snuggle with you. And when they're feeling like my son, when he was feeling sick, he wanted to snuggle with me and that would help him feel better. So I'm going to be like, I'm not going to snuggle with you because I don't want to get sick. I guess
Go
I could have
snuggle with your dad.
But then I would have like a mask on. I suppose I could have done that, but then it feels weird. So anyway, it's hard. But
the one thing that I do want to bring up and something that I think is important is sometimes the body can go through what I would call like phantom sickness during your
Mhm.
taper.
Uh-huh.
So I did want to talk a little bit about
Kinda
this
thought
is
what I
that
thought I had. I was hopeful. I
yeah,
was like, "Hopefully this
it's
is
not
just
a
this
reason
weird."
it's not a reason to completely freak out if you
Yeah.
start to feel under the weather. I won't say like you start to feel sick, you just feel off.
Like, sometimes
That
achy,
is
you
that's
feel
common. Yeah, that's
yeah, like, I
common
felt
during the
achy
taper.
before. I've had, like,
Yeah.
weird phantom pains, like joint aches that kinda
Mhm.
creep up. Yeah, just body achy stuff that's happened. That's why when that happened to me in that, like, somebody would have argued, like, "Well, probably should have traveled." I thought I was just I was, like, optimistic, actually. I'm like, "Hopefully this is just those weird." 'Cause I
Yeah.
tried to run and it was, like, a little bit I was like, "I don't feel great," but I'm like, "It happens to me a lot. I've had this happen before." So, it's hard, you know, like, 'cause
Yeah.
and then, yeah, I think there's this tendency to be like, "I'm getting sick," and it could just be something unrelated. It could just be that, yeah, whatever the body happens to the body that's weird before a race. I don't know why it does this, but
Well,
it's a
the
fan
body is going through a repairing process to a certain
True, yeah.
extent. I mean, it's
To
trying to
get you
it's shedding fatigue, it's shedding stress, and it's trying to fix things that are quote unquote broken. And
right,
so it's and you're so in tune with every signal that your body is sending you because you're in taper and you're so on edge because your race is coming up, and so you're hyper vigilant and really in tune. So anything that pops up, you're more likely to be paying attention to the signals rather than
right.
if you had those same signals that your body was sending you, but you were in the build phase of your training plan. You were kind of like halfway through. You probably would ignore the signals, but you wouldn't perceive them because you'd be like, okay, well, it's just, it's the body's reaction to fatigue and we're just training. But you put those same exact signals during the week of taper and it's a completely different interpretation and
Uh-huh.
how close you are to paying attention to them. So I don't want people to freak out, during taper week
That's
because it is
true.
a super common thing. So if you're especially right now, so we're in January and you have people that are training for spring marathons and spring half marathons right around the March period. So you're probably getting closer now to, let's say you're kind of maybe starting the early build phase if you're in a marathon, right at that break even point between building your base and the build phase of a marathon. This is something that you should be paying attention to later on and to not absolutely just freak out because training for these early season races bring their own nuances because of the conditions. So people
Right.
are getting sick around you. There are germs that are flying around because of the cold weather it's not the temperatures aren't warm enough to kill off the germs, and so it's kind of like the building of a perfect storm. So I think that's why some of these early season races are really challenging to train for and prepare for is because of those kinds of conditions, and trying to
Mhm.
stay healthy this time of year is harder than if you were to take that exact same race and move it to July and August.
Yeah,
Very
that's very
different
true.
situation. So just keep that in mind. It might be the time where I do want, because we're going to talk about some immunity part.
Mhm.
It might be time to just do stupid stuff, like simple stuff it may be completely placebo, but it might be a time where it's like, okay, I'm going to increase my vitamin C. You know,
Right.
does
Yeah.
does it make a difference? I have no idea. Does it make you maybe feel more secure that you're doing everything that you can do to ward off sickness? Sure. If that provides a level of security for you, that's fine. The body's not going to like freak out and you're not going to hurt something by overdosing on vitamin C. Your body's just going to excrete whatever it
Right.
doesn't utilize
It's not
anyway.
gonna
So
yeah,
the
it's not
worst
gonna be
thing
like
that you're doing is you're just peeing away money, which, a couple vitamin
yeah, we
C
could talk a
tablets,
little bit
what's
about
that?
that,
So
what the science says there and basic so yeah, I think, like, maybe this is a good time to
yeah.
move on to that topic of, like, okay, we're in January, illnesses are going around. What can you do to try to keep yourself healthy? Hey, everybody. So that is the conclusion of part one of our athlete and immunity, athlete and illness episode. We decided to split this into two episodes. So our next episode that will be coming out next week will be we'll be kind of picking up where we left off and we'll be talking about the community side, what athletes can do to not maybe exactly prevent illness, but how athletes can potentially use supplements and food and or other strategies to help increase immunity and decrease the time that you spend being sick. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. It's kind of cut off, but we invite you to join in next week when we talk a little bit more about strategies to help the immune system. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.